This is
Ah,
Otherworldly, Changing Times, Changing Worlds Wednesday show. And tonight we are, I'm Chipacon, and I'm asking tonight's guest, Starwolf, otherwise known as Sean Kane,
hello.
about his aspects of being an urban shaman. We're not sticking down to one thing. He has done many workshops and moderated many panels on Changing Times, Changing Worlds, and he has done lots of shows with me over the last 10 years.
And we'll hopefully be moderating some more this year.
They're usually down to, we ask him about crystals, we ask him about potions, we ask him about defense of the dark arts, we ask him about all kinds of things, and tonight it's just open season on Starwolf. And so if you want to ask him a question,
bulletproof vest.
Well, it's all in the name of education, right?
I know.
So people will find out more about being a shaman and bringing it into the modern world. Starwolf has calls himself well, aside from being a shaman, a witch, a professional psychic, a Reiki master, he calls himself a metaphysical engineer and and soldier of fortune. And the idea of bringing the magic of the ancient world into the modern world without it kicking and screaming, or maybe sometimes it does.
It's the modern world that tends to kick and scream, actually. The magic just kind of slides in there and sets up shop and grins.
So we are going to be doing that. And I figured I would start out with asking, what kind of a shaman are you? Because that is one of the panels that we have had, is different kinds of shaman. So
okay, let's start. That's actually the easiest one. Unlike a lot of people, I am not part of any sort of shamanic culture. I use the techniques I learned from, among other things, Michael Harner, Sandra Ingerman, Bernardo Peixoto. But I'm not looking to run out into the woods, and I can find plenty of spirits even here in suburbia. So basically, I am an urban shaman. I am most comfortable surrounded by concrete and with asphalt under my feet, and quite honestly, a nice selection of late night takeout restaurants available. But, well, a lot of people in the pagan world seem obsessed with living out in the woods. Yet remember, except for a good deal of history, most cities were pagan, or polytheistic at least. Mm-hmm. Pagan being, Pagani, basically hick, just fell off the turnip cart from Ravenna, sort of thing. But Rome, Alexandria, Babylon, those were cities that until fairly recently, especially Rome, had more gods than you could shake a stick at. Every crossroad had its deity. Every fountain had a group that was basically based out of the local wine bar that was in charge of making sure the fountain kept going and placating the deity of that fountain. Every household had its deities. Using Rome, which a lot of people say yachtui about, but Rome was the largest polytheistic society on the planet, except maybe, well, at least in the Western world. China and India, I'm not counting either of those, because after all, India is still pretty much a polytheistic, metaphysically oriented society once you strip away the Christian Gandhiist candy-coated shell over it and get out into the villages. They're still there. So I am what would basically exist if Rome had not gone the way it had, if Julian had succeeded in restoring the gods, in restoring the worship. Now, I'm not Romano-Hellenic in my outlook, though I had a long relationship with Artemis before I hit puberty, and then she stopped returning my calls. But from what I understand, that is fairly common.
Yep.
So I got to the point, I actually built a temple to her using, they weren't Legos, they were some other sort of building brick, but it had doors that opened. You could take the little cardboard roof off, and there was colonnades on either side and an altar in the middle, and even, that little adytum in the back where they stored all the stuff that they used in rituals. So it was about as accurate as a 10-year-old could do, given the limitations of my materials. Unfortunately, I do not have a picture of it because, well, didn't think to take one back then. But as I said, she stopped returning my calls, and I went on to find other gods, because it was kind of, well, that was the first time I got dumped by a deity.
Yeah, we know
But
that.
from what I understand, like I said, that it's a fairly common one among pre-adolescent boys.
Well, she likes the wild children.
Yeah, and I guess I was always a rather different child. My first encounter with spirits were back when I was in the single digits, and I would regale adults about my adventures with an albino buffalo, and talking to what I consider the tutelary deity of, or guardian spirit of, New Haven, the Nighthawk, who I had several encounters with, because a couple of them nested up on the roof of the building we were living in at the time. And when my mom would go up to hang laundry on the roof, because that was back when you had, if you were lucky, you had a washer, and then you took it upstairs to the roof where there were lines to put your laundry out in the air to dry. And there were often nighthawks kind of hanging out in that little angle section where the roof met the up part of the wall, to give you what, at least from the point of view of a 2- and 3-year-old, was a massive wall that I was not allowed to climb up on top of. Perhaps because it was 8 stories to the ground if I made a mistake.
Yeah. Parents worry about things like that.
Yeah, silly things like, your kids falling to their death. How we survived back in the barbaric times of the late 50s and early 60s. But basically, as I said, I find gods are everywhere. Some of them aren't particularly powerful. Some of them are only, they may only be connected with a building or a, couple of city blocks. But there are, using New York specifically as the example, there are gods everywhere. You want to find Marduk, go to the top of the Empire State Building. You might run into him there. And we are talking the god of the city. That is his title. He is the Lord of Cities. And as he said, this is it. This makes Babylon look like a goat farm. Of course, back in the day, I'm sure he felt differently about Babylon, but it's currently a pile of decaying mud brick.
Hey, mud brick was high tech then.
Yeah. And I'm sorry for those of you who watch Supernatural, Castiel, the ziggurats got way more than 80 feet tall. You can pile mud brick that high. You just got to start with a really wide base.
Yeah. Now I'm going to go back to physics and say one of the things I love is you calling yourself a metaphysicist, because a lot of people
actually
use the term metaphysician, and you combine magic and physics and make science work with magic brilliantly.
I refer to quantum mechanics as the sleazy little bar where magic and science meet up. Magic grins and science looks embarrassed because more and more they're finding, the deeper they go in, the tinier the particles they work with, the more they're starting to sound like some of the old, especially late 19th, early 20th century grimoires. So, think of what do they refer to it as, weird action at a distance, where they find that items that have been connected remain connected, even though you might have taken them to the other side of the planet. Isn't that kind of like the whole idea that, I get hold of your fingernail pairings or your hair, and even though they're no longer part of you, I can use it to heal you or harm you?
Makes sense.
You look at the laws of magic as they were defined, things like the image is the thing. Items that were connected remain connected. Those are pretty valid things in quantum mechanics. Now, I've had people scream that only works at just above absolute zero. Well, have you ever tried it?
Yeah.
Have you ever tried making an image of the item that you are trying to affect? That's another one, the Heisenberg principle, where you're observing an item changes that which is observed. Sounds like a basic definition of, once again, healing, hexing.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like that. And I find, well, given that, because I work with crystals, and if you look deep enough inside pretty much everything that is, that was invented after about 1950, that we have crystals in them. There is a crystal in my tablet vibrating right now because they've applied an electrical current to it that allows my tablet to function. It's the clock crystal. Now, back when I first started playing with electronic devices, those clock crystals were about the size of my thumb, but integrated circuits are etched into what? Quartz, lab grown, so it's got the impurities they want, but it's not much different than taking a slice out of a really good quartz crystal and using that. I don't have the equipment to etch it, and quite honestly, I don't think Kathy would like me to have those levels of acid available in the house. Once again, she has this funny thing about me having explosives and acids and things available. Something to do with a vision she had as a child of being blown up.
Oh.
I actually managed to do that to her at Penzic once. I had a bunch of little concussion bombs I'd made out of, those Rio poppers. That is basically sand that has had filament of mercury put on top of it. I would take them apart and put like 10 into an aluminum foil shell. And when they went off, they went off with the sound basically of a 44 Magnum going off. But she accidentally sat down on a container of them and they all went at once.
Oh no. Okay, there you
Oh, yes.
You blew your
way. Yes, I've done what many husbands contemplate. I did by accident.
Oops.
Yeah, that was an oops. It was a serious oops. But so it makes sense. I mean, there was a whole series of books put out by Llewellyn about using crystals to make things, wands, shield generators. I have to repair a bunch of stuff, but once we have a physical changing times, which will hopefully be, 2022, I will perhaps do the weird science class. I have to redo the I forget what the name of it was, but it's a box with rheostats that allows you to turn into the resonant frequency, because the sitting down in the basement for several years, the cardboard is starting to come apart. So I'm going to have to find another box to punch holes in. But also, if you look at, there is a book out called Mind Machines You Can Make. And if you look at one of the ones that's been the most popular, it's called a wishing machine. It is basically the circuit for a standard audio amplifier, which you can buy on a little chip. And if you get some of those, well, you can't get them at Radio Shack now because most of the Radio Shacks I know are gone. But you can get what they used to refer to as, they were experimental breadboards. You didn't solder things in, you plugged them in. You could plug a bunch of them in, one thing in series, one set in parallel, so you boosted both power and amplitude. Kind of like building a spiritual AM/FM radio.
Cool.
Still got the parts downstairs. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Thor. Raspberry Pi does something like that, and they use the same. They use basically the same plug-in breadboards in, especially if you buy like a beginning Arduino, which is another one of the physical computing setups that they were talking about. I've got one downstairs. I've never bothered to assemble it. I probably should, but once again, it's a matter of energy and focus. This week, it is going to be renewing the symbols on my staff and creating, if I have the time and the energy, my version of the Infinity Gauntlet. I refer to it as the Infinity Amulet. I have a bunch of tachyon cells. Each one is in the color of one of the Infinity Stones. Oh, for those of you who don't know, tachyon cells are little silicon dioxide hemispheres that come from a company called Advanced Tachyon Technology. They're basically energy lenses. And I've got a big opalescent one about 1 inch across to go in the middle, and a big pile of gold Fimo clay to act as the base. Fimo is a great stuff. It's a polymer clay. It's like Sculpey. It's a brand name.
Yeah, I know. I was just wondering what it's made of.
It's some sort of thermosetting polymer. I'd have to look it up to get you the exact chemical formula, which is probably about yay long and almost unpronounceable by anybody, including me, who can pronounce stuff out of the Necronomicon. Yeah, it is plastic, but plastic. People seem to think plastic is magically negative. No, it's actually neutral. Most plastic is magically transparent. And especially, I'll throw a few things into the clay. Tachyonized silica dust can be molded into it, and it turns it into basically a far more receptive material. Work iron filings into it, and it becomes magically repulsive. So finding actual powdered iron these days is harder than I want to think. Exactly.
I was thinking about one of the most effective wands I ever used was a optical quartz rod it's designed to put energy through without any distortion. Brilliant. And then you put a crystal on the end of that and secured it with some silicone glue goop.
Mm-hmm.
And then you wrap it with whatever made it decorative for you. But
exactly, and those are not that expensive. Mm-hmm. You can get lab quartz bars for about $10 each still. Less if you want to buy in bulk.
Yeah, well, I bought in bulk. I got 20 of them, and I couldn't sell them. It took me 10 years. Nobody wanted to buy them because they look modern.
Yeah, well, there is something to be said because natural quartz crystals, each one has its own personality. Thor, Etch-a-Sketches have mercury in them. You don't necessarily want to use that stuff. That's why they stopped making them. The stuff inside is a mercury compound. Yeah. I actually have a bottle of it that I bought years ago called fixed. It's the fixed mercury that they talk about in some of the old Grimmers.
Oh.
But you don't, that's why they stopped making them for many years, because the stuff inside is a mercury compound, and it's not necessarily something you want the kids to crack open and eat.
My brother didn't eat, but he did crack one open.
Yeah, well, mine kind of broke too, but they got rid of it faster than I could play with all the funny little silver beads inside.
Yeah.
But then again, I also wasn't allowed to have the nuclear energy lab that was very popular from the mid 50s to the early 60s, where you got samples of uranium ore and an irradiated pin to make a cloud chamber and your own little Geiger counter.
Well, I was going to ask you a little bit later to tell us about your staff and your bear and your amulets. Since you've already brought it up.
Okay, well, those of you who have been at Changing Times, Changing Worlds see me walking around with about a 5.5 foot long wooden staff with a crystal on top. These days held in place with, as opposed to the epoxy that Tinker used the first time, because it eventually popped out through just combination of age and energy stress, I guess. I pulled a new crystal out of my store. So basically I went looking for a volunteer, and I used gray auto repair putty. That stuff does not come apart. It has etched into it down the front the Anglo-Frisian or Northumbrian runes. There are tied around the top and also on either side. One side says, "My name is Schmitter," in really bad Swedish, because I use Google Translate. It's also done in runic, or in runes. The other side says "Child of Yggdrasil," because it is ash wood, and it got a good fire hardening after I bought it. That's what the blowtorch was for. Down underneath the rubber cup, there is a copper. Well, it's basically it's an end cap for plumbing, but with a little bit of sanding on both pieces, it now fitted onto the bottom to give me a cap to keep it from splitting. And under the cap, in a spot that I drilled out, is a tachyon cell with the emission side facing up through the staff. So it's got a permanent battery. The Anglo-Frisian runes are etched down the front. On the back and a few other places, there are symbols from Runewalder, the stuff we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. And there's also, because he likes them, a bunch of miniature metal skulls and some bells hanging from them. The bells are because bells figure very heavily in shamanic work and in old-fashioned witchcraft, for basically driving things away, serving as a purification, serving as partially as an exorcism. So there's a bunch of jingle bells tied onto what amount to shoelaces, because those, once again, I chose something that would be durable, and dollar store bootlaces seem to work very well. The skulls are tied on with good old-fashioned solid core copper wire. And indeed, one of the things I'm adding this week is a stag skull charm that I found at, of all places, Michael's, because I went in there to get some new paint pens. I will not have to reblood the symbols, because I did that once. This is more a case of renewal. So basically the ones where my hand usually rides tend to get worn. So periodically I have to repaint them, and I found my paint pens had gone the way of all flesh. They dried up. So I spent $12 and got not quite all of the colors, that was 40, but I got the purple, the gold, the red, the blue, everything I need to renew things. So Schmitter has among other things, he has on him engraved the Grishtor, which is the symbol for making holy objects. So yes, things that get hit, by the way, Schmitter is a bad translation of the word smiter, which is kind of what his purpose is. You know, when I need to smite things. Grandfather had Gungnir, Uncle Don has Mjolnir, Freyr had his sword, but he traded it away for a girl. And I've got mine. It has not quite reached the status of becoming a great weapon. That requires a soul, and I'm kind of reluctant to do what is necessary. There's like I said, there are a bunch of symbols on it. There's the battery symbol, so he maintains energy. There is the spirit trapping symbol, so that he gets to eat what he kills. There is the connection one, and he is connected, as I said, to his mama or papa. Ash trees being the kind of thing that you don't need a mama ash and a daddy ash to make ash berries. So, you know, mama, daddy, depending on the day. Yggdrasil. And he serves, like I said, he is my primary magical weapon, to use an old ceremonial magic term. He is a wonderful one for walking around fairs and conventions, because face it, my knees aren't what they used to be. It was really great at spring thing. He helped me get back up that hill from where they put the facilities from where we were. Nice sight, too long a walk to the portalet. So that is Schmitter. I have a smaller one. I have a faux blackthorn staff from a company, or blackthorn walking stick from a company named Cold Steel, that I use in situations where walking around with a 5.5-foot staff are inappropriate, like say Disney World or Disney Cruise Lines, which they don't like you to have staves because of the narrowness of the corridor. So I couldn't bring Schmitter, so I made Thumper, who has pretty much the same symbols on him that Schmitter does, only without the bells and the skulls. So, you know, TSA loves him because the polypropylene he's molded out of is completely X-ray transparent, unlike, say, metal orthopedic canes, which you can stick stuff into, and not necessarily what I would stick into them, which would be crystals and talismans and things. People would probably want to stick, you know, nasty stuff. So, you know, as far as the bear, I should have brought him with me, but I wasn't thinking. Like I said, I was a little bit brain dead tonight. Typical Wednesday. His name is Bartholomew, and those of you who've been to Changing Times know he comes with me. Sometimes he attends all the classes that I go to. Sometimes he just wants to hang out in the hotel room with the other stuffies we bring with us. You know, watch TV, order room service. But he always does show up at the Runewalder classes, because I took a leaf from Reiki training, where in order to get used to attuning people to Reiki, you attune a stuffed animal. Kathy did that to her bear, Andrew, who is a Reiki master. We refer to him as Dr. Andrew. And whereas Bartholomew is a Runewalder master. So he could theoretically, if I manipulated his paws for him, because he's not that mobile, he could theoretically attune people, which would perhaps be interesting, or to certain people, somewhat scary. But those are the two primary things I've made using Runewalder. You'd pay to see. It would look kind of like a really bad backstage at the Muppets, because I'd have to hold him up and manipulate his paws. But what's also going to be interesting is, face it, and who do Muppets pray to? They they pray to Jim Henson, obviously. He is their creator god.
I was just thinking, perhaps many Muppets are probably awakened with the amount of energy that has been poured into them.
Oh yeah, but
So,
there's awakening there is the gradual awakening that happens. It's called enchantment through use.
yeah.
So you use an item for something. Pardon me for shifting. My back started to say unkind things to me. You use something, a stick becomes a staff over years of use in a circle. A table knife can become a ritual blade because you use it again and again and again for the same thing. Same thing happens in kitchens. Certain pots and pans create better dishes than others because they've been used and loved and maintained. That works best with cast iron because, well, cast iron requires a certain amount of ritual and prayer and anointing and swearing to keep the stuff going. Swearing usually happens when somebody shoves it in the dishwasher, and you have to go back through the entire cycle again. So, but Schmitter and Bartholomew are more it's alive, only without the necessity of a club-footed hunchback assistant who is knowledgeable of both the uses of static electricity and balloons and kites. Haven't quite found an Igor, which is, given that I'm getting old, that might not be, I should probably start looking. But how does one advertise for an Igor?
First, you get permission from your wife.
Well, that would be if I got an Ilsa. Igor's for tradition.
If you installed him in your house.
Given this house, we'd have to install him like putting in a new bathtub. It's a very small house. It is only four rooms, a basement, and an attic we were planning on finishing. But at this point, going up and down those stairs is probably not a good idea.
I was thinking about your basement, where I understand you've done some cool stuff.
Well, it's my lab, and if I'd had the energy, it would be in much better shape than it is now. But I have a section that is set off. It functions as my laboratory, my ritual space. There's another ritual space sort of in the backyard that is the cinder block that I use to leave sacrifices to spirits and other things out on. And the animals make sure that the liver that I put out for various deities always disappears. Though I do every couple of months, I have to go up and clean up the bottles of chocolate, little nip-sized bottles of chocolate Baileys. If you are going to try and get on the good side of a goddess, especially, Celtic or Norse, chocolate Baileys will get you a lot of mileage. Chocolate and booze together in the same package. Never mind mead. Never mind ritual wine. Chocolate Baileys.
Okay. And
the regular
that's
stuff.
Another aspect of experimentation.
Yes. I went through a lot of different boozes before I found the ones that work. As your wife feels called out. Why? She likes chocolate Baileys? I can't drink the stuff anymore. I'm diabetic and my medication won't allow me to consume, which is unfortunate because I loved Baileys. Tullamore Dew works well too if you can get hold of it, but that stuff is rarely obtainable. And of course, other gods like other things. To get to something a little more deity oriented. For example, Loki loves Fireball, which is a cinnamon very strong cinnamon flavored bourbon, I think. Not
And
many of them actually like the Scotch or Irish whiskeys. I'm finding a lot of deities tend to prefer various, bourbon, rye, Canadian, if you're going to be pouring strong spirits.
Thor is fond of, we found Thor to be very fond of Captain Morgan's.
Yeah.
But I think
that's
that
also very,
Thor's favorite is, I'll have some of what you're having.
yeah. I tend to actually, once again, as I can't drink, I tend to use, for that matter, I tend to get not Captain Morgan's, but there is a Admiral Nelson dark Jamaica rum that I can get in nip-sized bottles, which work very well for pouring offerings to the gods, because, and that's also the one I leave on Miles Corey's great memorial stone every time we go to Salem. Or Giles Corey, not Miles. I am tired. Yes, I always leave him I leave the man a shot of rum. Everybody's leaving flowers and this and that. Here, Giles. He was a 17th century man. Here's a rum for you. Pour a little bit out, leave the bottle for him.
Nelson, dark Jamaica rum.
Yeah.
Here.
I couldn't hear the rest of that. Couldn't hear the rest of the question. Hello?
I missed it too.
Cognac. Yeah, that would be great if you're dealing with Gaulish deities. Cognac. Or, for that matter, Calvados. Norman Apple Moonshine.
Well, since we're talking gods,
Yeah.
Can you say a few words about your relationship with your adopted grandfather?
Yeah, he adopted me many, many years ago. The being I call grandfather, other people call Odin. And excuse me while I remove my glasses and shut my right eye. As you can see, I look just like the old bastard. Indeed, if you get a copy of Morgan Daimler's book on Odin, no, I did not pose for the cover art. That was an inspiration by an artist who has never met me, and I have never met her. Though I would love to get a print of the art without the all the various print, informational stuff on it, just to hang as but it looks just like me. Or I look just like it. And it says something about gods and bloodlines, because I look like my father and my actual paternal blood grandfather, even though I never met the man. I met my step grandfather, but not my actual blood grandfather. He disappeared and died of something. I'm not quite sure what. Probably cirrhosis of the liver by the time I came around. He was one of those wonderful, interesting gentlemen whose family paid him to stay away. Well, the Kanes are among other things mine tend to be, we're such a mix of Irish, Scots, Russian, Ukrainian, and those are two separate nationalities, remember? And as well as Crimean Tartar and who knows what else, because, we can track part of the family back to leaving Russia in the 1840s because we are on the wrong side of a family squabble called the Decembrist Revolution. And they were given the choice of emigration or Siberia. The Scots came in 1845, running from the Duke of Cumberland, because after a little thing called the Battle of Culloden, where we were on the losing side yet again. And the Irish arrived, some as early as 1790, but most, of course, arrived during the Great Hunger. Though oddly enough, we are not my family is Irish, except for my mother's end, is Irish Protestant, not Irish Catholic. So yes, I'm an Orangeman, but which is a slight difference if you understand the politics in Ireland. So when we do the St. Patrick's Day parade, I am literally marching down the street humming No Union to myself, which is a nice marching cadence. But my relationship with Odin is one of a child to my, as I like to define him, my usually absent, occasionally present, sometimes benevolent, often abusive grandfather. He is the relative who blows into your life, picks fights with your parents, leaves a bunch of inappropriate comic books for you, and a couple of presents and tasks that he wants you to do for him, and then blows out again. I am literally one of those people who begins his invocations with Odin, you bastard. Which is why I look at some of the more contemporary heathens who have a somewhat Marvel Comics view of Odin,
Yeah.
even though, you know, I would love to see him as the character from the movies, because, you know, they did an excellent job, including the patch riveted over one eye. It's like, you know, even grandfather doesn't take it to that extreme. Though he could actually be the god, the patron deity of, you know, sacred ordeals. He's certainly been through enough. And for those of you who've seen me, you know there are runes burnt into my forearms and then tattooed over. And the tattooing part was the easy bit. Multiple strokes with a red hot iron, on the other hand. Well, the truth is, after the third or fourth time, the endorphins kick in and you feel great. Thank you, Fakir Mustafa, who I learned from ages ago the art of scarification. Oh, something just beeped.
That's me warning that we're getting close to the end.
Well,
before we get to, I wanted to wonder if you might not have been adopted because of your talents and maybe because of your relationship with the other kin spirit you who's also attached to you.
Oh, you mean
Starwolf is very complex. The dire.
Yeah. You mean having a bit of a monster stuck inside me, because my college roommate's grandfather wanted to teach me to be a singer, but which is a type of priest in the Navajo spiritual tradition, but got his grandkids ratted him out to the tribal council, and he was told, if you do that, we'll cut off your welfare payments. You do not teach Belagana how to do this. So he took me out onto the West Mesa. We dug a hole. He filled me full of a substance called corpse dust and more than a bit of peyote. And, well, let's just say I've been down the gullet of a monster and shat back out into the world. And I keep wondering if the father of monsters isn't just another archetype for Fenrir. But I am what is technically known as a skinwalker, which is a kind of shape changer. I can no longer do it physically. I'm getting old. But if you ever run into me in the spirit world, you're probably going to see a large, gray, one-eyed wolf. Because you laugh, but, you know, that button that says I was 250 pounds of Ice Age Predator before it was fashionable, that was done in response to Game of Thrones, and, you know, oh, the Starks have dire wolves. Yeah, I used to be able to get that big, long time ago, before a lot of things happened. But, you know, I've been dead twice that I know of. I flatlined once on the operating table when they were putting my skull back together after getting it poked full of shrapnel in the Yom Kippur War. I didn't duck fast enough. Though I suppose if I ducked fast enough, it would have blown in the top of my helmet instead of the rim. But I look very different than I did before I was the 13-year-old me looked very different from the 15-year-old me. 14-year-old me looked basically like the Hammer Frankenstein, the Lee version. Bunch of scars and things. Excuse me. But the other time was when I was in the hole, which if I hadn't come back out again, they would have just filled it in on top of me and pounded the earth down and hoped nobody decided to put a condo on top of it. Or if something climbed out that was just kind of wearing me, they were going to hit me in the head with a shovel and fill the thing in. Certain portions of the Digne tradition are played rather rough.
So, Skinwalker and Dire Wolf. Yeah.
Yeah, well, a lot of
shaman shit.
Yeah, you find a lot of involuntary types. We tend to end up inside Pleistocene animals. I know one from a long time ago who's an Irish elk. Massive horns, big enough, as wide as this room I'm sitting in. Beautiful. But, when was the last time you saw one of those marching down downtown Dublin?
Know anybody who's gotten aurochs?
No, and I would be scared. Though one of the spirits I work with, which is apparently which is called Stormbowl, that is the form he takes. That's the one, if you're at fair and you see me chanting to try and get the rain to either go away or let's have a 5-minute downpour and then you can leave. It's the one that's also painted on my shield that I sometimes display, but mostly I don't do that because it tends to call inclement weather. That's kind of an oops. Yeah. It's a stylized auroch skull with a couple of symbols around it. The symbol for death, the symbol for beast, the symbol for wind. Yeah, I was heavily influenced by a game called RuneQuest.
Oh, I was going to ask you about your new set of runes that you made this last winter.
Well, that was actually 2 years ago because I've been using them.
Lost track.
Yes. But I really have to take them out, set them up, and take a photograph of them so I can keep that in a file on my computer. Basically, what I did was it was a several-year project. I basically made a set of casting or drawing runes using the upper arm bone that you get once you're finished eating chicken drumettes. And I had to, oh my God, I had to consume way more than I actually needed to get the 32 bones that I needed, because chickens ain't uniform. To get 32 almost matching, I went through an awful lot of bones. I still have almost enough to do another set downstairs. Mostly they're the ones that are either really too big or really too small. So and what I did was once I finished washing them and they sat for a year on the kitchen windowsill drying because, well, I gave them a 24-hour soak in bleach to get the grease out of them. It's out of most of them. Some of them it didn't come out because they were cooked in a pressure fryer. And I've also discovered next time I make a set of bones, a 50-50 solution of bleach and water, not straight bleach, because for the first few uses, I was getting calcium chloride off of them, the stuff that you throw on your driveways. I could tell because my fingers tips were drying out because it has a hygroscopic effect on human skin. So but it is finally worn off. And one of these days I have to get out some spray urethane and just seal them. That may happen, well, not this weekend, but maybe next weekend I will be setting them up and sealing them so that they don't. I
Okay.
worried that linseed oil would react with the acrylic paint I used.
We got a question that would like to know, what's a good way of looking for your spirit form?
Well,
If you don't want to get filled with peyote and corpse dust and
Yeah.
berry.
yeah, because that's a rather radical method. The best way is to learn to do shamanic journeying. Basically, learn to do otherworldly journeying. And there's plenty of people who can teach you that. As I said, you can always pick up a copy of Dr. Harner's Way of the Shaman. I know a lot of people who look at it and hiss and scream cultural appropriation and this and that. But Doc Mike is not claiming to be any particular shamanic tradition. He is gone through several of, it's called Way of the Shaman. And you can get it through the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. But it's got all the basics. They also sell various drumming. Well, you can tell how old I am. I keep saying tapes, but you can get CDs and MP3 downloads that will have, let's see, there's double drumming, single drumming, yoiking, which is kind of a Norse Finnish one that I have a problem with because the rhythm is way too much like Rosin the Bow. And they'll think, how many filk songs do I know that have been written to the tune of Rosin the Bow?
Yeah.
So that one doesn't work. They've got Birembau, which is the single string, actually wire strung bow they use in capoeira and in certain forms of Brazilian spirit work. They've got Tibetan singing bells. Pretty much anything that will suit you. I'm finding I have a 30-minute version of a, what is it called? The band is called Heilung, and it's one of their pieces. They are a sort of a Norse folk rock band. Yeah, Heilung, yes. And they've got a 30-minute version available out on YouTube, and I've been using that. Yes. I love their songs too. I can't play them at work because they tend to put me into a trance. Though it's interesting, if you watch the original video, they're chewing on mushrooms before it starts, but it's not the right mushroom. They're chewing on puffballs because fly agaric, Animata muscaria is not round and white. It's red with little white dots on it.
I love the puffballs. Okay, before we get off, I really wanted to ask you to tell us about tell us the story, Uncle Starwolf, about the most interesting magical operation you've done, or if you don't want to. I was thinking about, there was something that you almost, that fire up to the ceiling of your cellar when you were banishing something, I think.
Oh, that one,
not
yeah.
The most
No, that was actually the most impressive because it damn near burned the house down. We were dealing with my wife's former boss. And because I have, yes, we won't get into her, so we won't invoke her. But I did what is referred, it's a Nepali Tibetan Bon shamanic tradition exorcism, where you connect the person to a cardboard cutout or a straw figure of a human being, and then to something that will function as the world tree. And you basically, I came up with a chant to the tune of Lui Luai, because the item in the center is called the lohi, and it came out to lohai loai, whoa whoa, you're gonna go above or below, etc., etc. And at the end, you cut the strings connecting the the three items together, you wrap it up, you wrap the loei up, and then you burn it. Well, now I normally put a little bit of, used candle wax in the bottom of the my fire bowl, which is actually a cast iron wok that was totally useless for stir frying, but made an excellent thing for burning things. And as opposed to the usual little bits of flame, we got a 3-foot high column with this nasty burning diesel smoke odor that, it's like somebody mixed diesel and sulfur together, and it kept trying to get to various flammable parts of the basement. And I had to keep warding it with my ceremonial knife, and it would recoil. And finally I grabbed the spray bottle of a substance called war water and started spraying it, and the thing was actually screaming, and more and more and more smoke. And I finally got it out, and there was this big, once again, big column of nasty smelling smoke coming out. We had to open the basement door, open the kitchen door, grab a couple of box fans, and literally run a power ventilation. So to basically clean, it took like 3 days to get the stink out of the basement. So that was the most spectacular because it almost burned down the bloody house.
And was unintended.
Yeah, I did not intend that. Right, I tend to prefer less spectacular magic. The subtler I can get, the better.
But did Mean Lady go away, or did you banish a
for a while?
out of
For a while, she was incapable of harassing my wife. But she's a member of one of these churches that believes in possession by spirit, and I keep wondering what they keep calling up, because it only lasted about 6 months. I did the exorcism again. The explosions were still intense, but less spectacular. But we were getting a case of diminishing returns. So, I mean, I'm not quite sure what they were bringing in, but it sure as heck wasn't one of the something benevolent.
Well, okay, we're about to go off, so I want to ask if has anybody else got any questions they wanted to ask. You can unmute yourself if you feel like it to ask questions. Anybody? Oh, we got any sources you recommend?
For books, let's see. For books on shamanism, anything by Michael Harner, except Hallucinogens and Shamanism. That was his PhD piece, and it's a little bit too scholarly. If you're starting in runes, Diana Paxson's Taking Up the Runes.
I find that to be frustrating if you haven't got a group to do it with, though.
Yeah, I know. Excuse me. With witchcraft, there's half a dozen good books. I mean, I always recommend Scott Cunningham if you're working by yourself, and a beginning Wicca Guide for the Solitary Practitioner. As far as runes go, lots of books, some of which are a little more advanced. Galina's book isn't bad, but that is for somebody who already understands the runes and understands the concept that runes are individual little spirits, each of which needs to be, as it were, placated or honored while you're making your runes. I bled for mine. The paint I used contains, and I still have the bottle downstairs, contains several drops of my own blood, plus a couple of drops of dragon's blood resin, because dragon's blood is great. It adds extra energy to anything. And that's what I use when I'm doing serious rune work. And I also and also the best way to get blood for your for doing such things, buy a diabetic lancet, the kind of diabetics use to get blood, to test our blood twice a day. Once you get used to it, it's just a little prick, squeeze, and you get as much blood as you need.
Feed me, Seymour.
No, I won't do that. I don't feed blood to plants. It's
Icky.
more importantly, the possibilities, given what I've got running around in my body, the possibilities of things turning into the little shop of horrors.
Okay, so this is suppose where I should thank you. This has been
You're welcome.
a really fun show. I
Thank you
wanted
for
to-
letting me ramble.
Well, you were slightly directed.
Yeah.
What I wanted today. Usually, you're focused. You're on your
Yeah.
defense against the dark arts, or warding, or potions, or
Yeah.
crystals. I wanted more of the gee, if he wrote his autobiography, let's get a little bit of this, and
Yes.
we got some of that. I want to ask.
Part of the problem is part of the problem is I am a somewhat hands-on teacher, and teaching through the magic mirror is interesting, but I like people to be able to hold the things and handle them, and turn the shield generator on and realize, ooh, turn it off, turn it off, turn it on again.
Well, this year we're going to be doing Changing Times, Changing World virtually again. Next year, let's hope we're actually, look, we've already got an offer from the Hudson, the haunted hotel that we were at a few years ago, and
Oh boy.
yeah,
I wonder if the thing on the fifth floor has moved out yet.
who knows?
I was in search of an ice machine. I went down on the fifth floor and something was moaning, and I said, look, take a good look at who you're trying to frighten, and the moaning stopped.
So tell your friends about Changing Times, Changing Worlds.
I'm doing that.
Yeah, and I was talking to everybody, and also
Well, more
whoever may be
importantly,
watching.
I will
somebody may
become
be
much more
watching this on
visible
YouTube.
once I am out of Facebook jail, which will happen Sunday.
And
Well, I unfortunately said something that somebody took offense at, and
Gee, that never happens.
no, it never happens on Facebook.
but so anyway, we are at our end. The change. I'm
Yep.
going to remind people, Changing Times conference this year is going to be on Zoom November 8th to 14th.
Yep.
And evening classes Monday through Friday, and all day on Saturday and Sunday.
Mhm.
We'll probably have Starwolf doing some interesting things.
Well, I have a panel suggested, or
I
I'm
was
hoping-
wondering if it would be useful. Do people think it would be useful to? So I'm going to actually stop the recording, but
yeah, that way we can just get into the.
But what